Oh, hello there. What's that? You've been invited to play Dungeons and Dragons. How wonderful. Nothing better as a gift for the holidays. What's this? Oh, you don't know how to create a character. My goodness. Well, I suppose we can help you with that. Let's dive into a very special episode of Redbeard's Workshop where we tinker with Dungeons and Dragons. Let's head to Redbeard's dungeon. Alright, thanks for joining me guys in this video. Redbeard's Dungeon is the section of videos where we discuss everything D&D, whether we're talking about source books, my experiences playing D&D, or in this case, how to go through character creation. I know that it can be very intimidating for a lot of new players because there are so many options, there are so many numbers and stats, it can be a little hard to navigate exactly what to do and how to get started. So I decided to do a walkthrough video showing how you can easily make a character on D&D and maybe some tips for making your play a little bit more enjoyable if you are a more experienced player and you feel like your combat or your gameplay is a little too repetitive. So we're going to use three tools, simple Google search for artwork and for name generators. We're going to use a website called RPGbot, which has a lot of different tabletop games in there with statistics, breakdowns of classes, breakdowns of races, spells, features, all things like that to help you be successful in your character creation. And of course, we're going to use the website didnt.Beyond. The reason I recommend that is because it does make it very user-friendly and makes it easy to not miss anything as you're creating your character. So join me as we take our steps through, and let's have some fun with it. Just a quick little spiel about D&D Beyond before we really get into things. The reason that I suggest that all my players use D&D Beyond for campaigns as a DM is because I can have access to their characters, so I can add weapons or I give them little notes or just double check their information before we're going into games to make sure that I'm not overpowering what they have. So it's a good way for me, as you can see here, all the campaigns that I'm either a player in or that I'm running as a DM, I have all my players here. So it's great because I can keep track of them. But also for players, 5th edition is pretty user-friendly. However, it's very easy to miss things. When I first made the jump from 4th edition to 5th edition, our Dungeon Master was also learning. We were all learning how 5th edition works. And there was a lot of things with my Paladin that I actually missed, that I didn't know how to do, which is pretty unfortunate. So I definitely don't want you guys to go through that same problem where you put all this effort into making a character and then you're missing things. D&D Beyond makes it pretty difficult to miss stuff. It makes it very obvious and easy to search and look through. It also kind of explains things and gives reasons for things. So it's a fantastic resource and it is free. So to follow along, if you're going to be making your own character in this video, you're going to need 3 pages open, D&D Beyond, RPGbot, and just have a Google search bar ready. Now this is going to be a long video. It's probably going to be about an hour or more. I will put chapters in, so if there are specific things that you want to look for or things that you're not interested in, I will list the chapters so you can decide which parts of the video you do want to watch. But if you're willing to sit through it all, you're brave and you're strong, and I salute you. So, once you have your profile created, you can actually go into characters to search through the characters you've already created. If you're using the free D&D Beyond, you have 10 character slots. If you have the paid version like I do, you have unlimited. So you can definitely go into create a character here on the main page. Or if you're like me and you have a ton, you just go down to characters, and then your list will appear. So like I said, you start with 10 free slots. As a forever DM, I have made way too many characters that I will never play. And I sometimes like to make my NPCs so that I can remember certain features or spells that they have. So I have 121 characters on my D&D Beyond page, which actually isn't a whole lot. I saw a post once where D&D Beyond on Instagram asked people how many characters they had, and I was maybe in the bottom half, which is interesting. So I made a couple characters actually already in attempts to film this before, and those attempts failed. The quality just wasn't good. So this is my third time's a charm, my third attempt to make this video. Because I made these characters already, we're going to go straight from scratch and make a new one here. The first video I made a barbarian as an example. The second time I did a paladin. I'm not really sure what we're going to do this time, but I will show you guys. So there are 3 methods for creating your character for D&D. Randomize means that you just choose the level and they pick the race, the class, and everything else for you, so you don't have to do anything yourself. We want you to have a little bit more control and really think things through. A quick build is similar. So whereas a randomized character randomizes your race and class, this one you choose it and it figures out subclass and everything else for you. Starts you at level 1. Most level 1 characters don't get a subclass, but some classes allow that. But the option we're going to do today is standard. So we're going to walk through every step of your character, as they say here, the step-by-step approach. If you are a beginner, 100% add this on here. It will walk you through and explain each stage of character creation before it lets you begin. So you'll read everything and then start at the beginning. I'm not going to go through that now because you can definitely do that on your own. So if you want to do that, pause the video, go ahead and read everything, and then pick back up with us. Alright, for everybody who's ready, let's click the standard button here, and let's begin creating our character. So, pretty basic at the beginning here. You may have an idea already of what you want to play, or maybe you have no idea yet. That's okay. What I like to do when I'm creating a new character is I try to think of either a theme or a reference. Whether it's a fantasy character that I'm trying to kind of recreate in D&D. I've done that with Robin Hood, where I had a little homebrew race of a kitsune, like a little fox folk who was a ranger in the woods. I created a turtle monk, which is kind of like a ninja turtle. I've made a Way of the Elements monk with an assassin rogue, who was basically as close as I could get to being Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat. You can use superheroes, all kinds of ideas of, I want a character to somewhat resemble my D&D character. You can even create witchers, very, very similar to witchers, by using Critical Role's Blood Hunter and using mutagens. So there's all different kinds of classes and subclasses you can use to make some pretty cool stuff. But yeah, depending on whether or not you have an idea in your head already, you can always go into Google and just search fantasy character art. I like doing this because sometimes I'll find an image and think, oh, that's cool, I want to play as that person, and then I'll build the character around the art. Now, obviously, I do not support the use of somebody's art without providing them credit. I know just for a video like this, it's not like we're actually making money off somebody's art. That's why I'm against those AI apps, because they actually do use the art of people online without giving them credit or paying them for it. But just for D&D, just for playing games with your friends, you can use this art. Save your image, make a little token out of it, play as it. There's nothing wrong with that. But what we're going to do here is just pick some art that we think is kind of cool and make a character out of it. I honestly think this art is really cool. This is awesome. Wow, it looks like we got some face tattoos, some colored hair, glowing. This is really neat. This is based off of I don't know what this is based off of. But that's pretty cool. Ooh! Yep. Alright, kids, this is what we're going to use. Looks like this is Anastasia Deg on Instagram. Anastasia Berry. Well, whoever you are, this is an incredible piece of art. Very cool. Good job. I love it. I like how you got kind of like the Feywild mushrooms and glow around here with the wizard hat. That's very cool. So that's going to be what we're using for our inspiration for our character. So we're going to make a spellcaster of some kind. Looks like she has pointed ears, so at that point we could make, an elf. We could make a gnome, a halfling, any creatures that have like little short ears here. And just based on the bust of the character, just the head, the neck, and the chest, you have no idea what their size is, what their head is, well, what their height is. So we can make that just about any race we want. And then the other thing that I find very handy is fantasy name generator. I can't type. That's okay. Finish it for me. This is an incredible website, which I use to help me come up with NPC names all the time. Now, because I studied ancient history in university, I did learn Latin, and so I am very often also just very torn between just coming up with a word that has to do with the character and association, and then turning it into Latin, putting it into Arabic, putting it into Greek, just translating words and then taking part of the translated word and turning it into a name. But this is much easier. As you can see here, this website uses all different kinds of pop culture references, video games, TV shows, movies, Diablo, Doctor Who, Destiny. You've got Dungeons and Dragons in here. You have Pathfinder. There's the Witcher series. There's all kinds of different genres that you can pull from to create names using male, female, neutral, and as well as, I believe, races. For most of these things, you can choose the race as well, which is kind of neat. I don't think I've ever looked at the Magic the Gathering one, so let's just look at that one for fun. Alright, so then you would pick, what kind of name am I looking for? An angel, a demon, a sphinx? What am I looking for here? We are going to be using, I think I like the idea of a little gnome. I don't think this has gnomes in it, so this is a bad example, but it doesn't matter. We're just going for a name here. Fairy kind of makes sense because, I don't know, the hat kind of looked Fey-ish, Feywild with the mushrooms and everything, so pick that. Alright, so sometimes it'll be first and last names. You can mix them up, take half of the first name, the back half of another name, and add them together to create something cool. Lululemon sounds a little bit too much like Lululemon, and I don't want to name our character after tights. Lesra, I think that's actually pretty cool. Lesra is a great name. But you can go through and look for as many as you want. And again, any video game, world of pop culture that you're interested in, find them on here, and then, go cycle through names for a while. But I really like Lesra, so we're going to do that. Now, for your character's icon, you can change this all the time if you want. You really don't have to be setting anything right now. You can always save the image, put it in later. I'm just clicking on a picture for now. Doesn't quite matter. It's just a placeholder. So we have our picture there for Lesra. Now let's get into actual, the main page here, the home page, is just your basic settings for your characters. Sources are the different books of content that D&D have come out with. Sort of the adventures that they release, and there's character options and items and things that get released with each new source book. So you will have access as a free player to the very basics. If there's something you want or that your DM wants to give you, it's only $1.99 to purchase extra items. And hopefully you won't need too many, or you can purchase the entire source book and have access to it digitally. I do a bit of each. Sometimes I like to have the hard copy book with me. Sometimes I like to have the digital content. It's really up to you. And again, you don't have to purchase anything. Homebrew content is anything that's been homemade by other players or by your DM. I have a lot of homebrew content. I love creating my own content for D&D, so I always have that active. That way, if I create my own item for my players, I can actually go into the campaign section, find the campaign, go onto their character sheet, and actually add an item that I created for them, which can always be a fun little surprise. Critical Role. For anyone not familiar with Critical Role, it is the Dungeons & Dragons live stream game run by Matthew Mercer, who's a famous voice actor, and there are many other voice actors who all play together in that game. They're in their third campaign online now, which they stream on YouTube and Twitch on Thursdays. And they've become so popular. They're such a large part of the revitalization of D&D that Wizards of the Coast has actually published some of their content and made it official, which is pretty cool. So we can keep that on there. But again, these options are pretty much up to your Dungeon Master. If there's anything he doesn't want to include, or she doesn't want to include, or they don't want to include, ask them, and they will tell you what it is that they prefer. I don't allow anyone to do the Ricky and Morty content because I don't know. I feel like I want to keep things high fantasy, and that's a little bit goofy and out of the way. Non-core are things that have not been confirmed yet. They're not official D&D content. Sometimes it's playtest material. Sometimes it's things that they thought about but then didn't add. Dragonlance is the newest content, so not everyone's going to have access to it. So in the interest of fairness, again, ask your Dungeon Master what they prefer. A lot of this stuff we're not necessarily going to go over. Optional class features. With the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything sourcebook, they added new class features. I can't see why your DM would care if you want to use those. They're pretty neat. They're just extra, options for your character. Customizing your origin, that's an option as well. We'll kind of get to that later. Now, just like in a video game, your character is going to level up, and their abilities are going to increase, their statistics are going to increase, and your options in gameplay are going to increase as you level up. Now, there's two ways of doing this. One is through Milestone. Milestone means your Dungeon Master, or DM, or GM, will tell you when you level up, based on certain events happening in the storyline that your DM has sort of decided already. They'll let you know when it's time for you to level up. I prefer doing this because then, if you end up having a lot of fights in a row, or your characters are just constantly picking fights with people in order to get experience points, it can derail your story just so they can level up. Or you may just happen to get them in a situation where they're fighting really tough people right away, and they might level up 2 or 3 sessions in a row, which can be kind of silly. Doing it Milestone means that your players aren't constantly asking you, how much XP do we get? How much XP do we get after every fight, after every session? And keeps them focused on just enjoying the story and letting you worry about when they're going to level up. Some people prefer to run it through experience points, but I think Milestone's better for a storytelling aspect. Hit point type. Each different class has a certain dice, like a 6-sided dice, 10-sided dice, 8-sided dice, 12, whatever it is. And each time you level up, you roll that dice, you add a modifier to it, and that's how many hit points you get every time you level up. The other option is doing it manually. So you could end up getting a really low number or a really high number if you want to risk it. However, if you forget to do it yourself when you level up, which a lot of new players do, you're going to have really low hit points compared to everyone else. I suggest you keep it fixed. It'll always give you the middle amount, the average, and it'll do it automatically for you so you don't have to worry about it. Everything else you can pretty much keep the same way. You can ask your Dungeon Master if you guys are going to be playing with encumbrance of weight, coin weight, that sort of thing. Make sure your character's public so your Dungeon Master can actually access and look at your character when you send them a link to it. But everything else, just keep the same. Alright, so when you take a look at my list here, you're going to see a ton of things that are not necessarily part of D&D. I have a lot of races that I've created myself and things that I found on here that other people have made that I thought were so cool that I included into my list. Everything here that says legacy content, like the Aarakocra, the bird-like humanoids, There is a newer source book with the newest version of them. I don't have that. I have the old version. That's why it shows legacy. If I turn it off, it disappears. But I want to be able to play as that race, and I want my players to as well. So I'm going to leave that on. Now, as a dungeon master, it's pretty cool. If I create a campaign and I invite people to that campaign, when they're going through their character creation, they will have access to everything I have on my account, which is pretty neat. So I'm going to keep this active. For our character, though, we're not going to do the dolphin humanoid homebrew race that I created, the Arteodin, or the add-on vampire, or any of that crazy stuff. We're going to keep to some simple things that already exist here. So we're going to go with a gnome. And we're going to go with a forest gnome. Adorable forest gnome. Now, each race that you pick are going to have different attributes and skills. And you can actually click on this and go right to the D&D Beyond page for gnomes and get a lot of information about them. How long do they live? What ability scores do they get? Oh, their intelligence score increases by 2, which we'll get to later as well. They don't walk as far because, you know, short legs. That's their height there. They have dark vision, which is great. They can see kind of basic shapes as if it's dim light in the darkness. They have some advantages on saving throws. Pretty simple stuff. But yeah, they're pretty cool. I like these creatures. Natural illusionist. As a forest gnome, we know the minor illusion cantrip. So even if we weren't going to play class of new spells, we would be able to cast this spell just because we're a forest gnome. That's pretty cool. Looks like our dexterity score increases by 1 with this class as well, which is pretty cool. Yeah. It shows you here kind of all the different things that your creature will get. You have advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throw. So when someone tries to cast a spell on you and asks you to make any one of these throws, you get a bonus to your roll, which is pretty cool. Again, we get our minor illusion spell. Speak with small beasts. Isn't that awesome? You can communicate with small creatures. I think it's pretty cool. Can add some shenanigans and some fun roleplay when you have little abilities like that. Now, when we talked about custom origins on the last page, this is kind of what that is. So, if you don't like the traits that your race has, you can now kind of choose your own. Choose your own ability score. Choose your own language. Kind of choose your own adventure for that race, so you're not just stuck playing certain races. You know, like typically if people wanted to play a barbarian, they would pick the biggest, strongest race with a bonus to strength. But maybe they want to play a goblin who is a barbarian because he has no control over his anger, and you want to just give him a little bit of boost to his stats. You can do that by using custom origin. So the idea behind this is if you wanted to play a race that maybe had, you know, emphasis on different things. Like I think the official reasoning behind it is if you were an orc tribe that instead of focusing on strength, focused more on dexterity, then maybe you'd be more dexterous than you would be strong. If you were a Goliath race that read books and only focused on intelligence, you could add intelligence instead of strength to your score, instead of charisma. So it gives you the option of, you know, maybe I was an orc that was raised by elves, so I have more features that align with that more. So that way you're not forced to play certain races for certain classes. It opened it up for you to customize it for whatever reason in your backstory makes sense, to allow you to add whatever statistics you wanted to whatever race you wanted. So, we have our name, we have our image here, and we have our race. Now we're going to pick our class. Including Critical Role's Blood Hunter, there are 14 classes that you can pick in D&D. Now, typically, these classes are split up into 3 main archetypes. One being magic, another being combat, and another one being magical combat. Now, regardless of which category your class falls into, there are subclasses you can pick which kind of blend everything together. So you can really add whatever flavor you want. A class determines what spells you have access to, what types of combat you can engage in, but later on as you level up, once you pick a subclass, it really gives you a more specific focus, which can blend into other types of gameplay as well, which is pretty neat, and we'll get to that. When we're looking at purely magic classes, which are typically weaker if they get hit, don't have a lot of hit points, they kind of stay back in combat, but they can cast a lot of really cool spells to buff the other players, to weaken the enemies, and do a lot of damage from a distance. Those typical magic classes are the Wizard, the Sorcerer, the Warlock, the Artificer, and the Bard. When we're looking at straight up combat, I just want to get in there and fight people. Very obviously, you're looking at the fighter. You can play a battle tactician. You can be a ranged fighter. You can be an Aragorn-like short sword fighter. You can do whatever you like with that one. It's very versatile. You can play as your barbarian. Just pure rage and anger and smashing. Think Hulk with an axe. Or you can play a ranger. Typically people play as just bows and arrows rangers, but there's even a subclass, I believe, of ranger where you have a pet dragon and it grows as you level up and you can ride your dragon. So there's all different kinds of ranger classes that are pretty versatile as well. You can play a rogue, which varies anything from arcane tricksters who have a bit of magic, or assassins, but rogues typically are known for sneaking around, and as long as no one knows they're there, they get extra damage on their attacks. Or you can play a monk who uses their fists or dedicated monk weapons, and they summon their ki energy into doing multiple attacks per round, more attacks than most people can. So they can be pretty fun as well. And as we come to magical combat, there are 4 classes in the magical combat. The main one I would say is Paladin. You use magic to empower your sword or your whatever weapon you're using to do more damage on your attacks. You have your Cleric. Now clerics are tanks. They typically have a shield, heavy armor, something like a mace, but then they cast a lot of magic as well. And based on your subclass, you can be a life cleric where you're just healing everyone, or you can be a war cleric where you just go into battle trying to kill everybody. It's very versatile that way. You can play a druid where you can cast all kinds of really cool spells, summon the power of the elements, and then when you want to throw down, turn into a big bear or a wolf or something and slash through your enemies. I just finished playing a druid in a campaign and it was the most fun I've had in D&D. Or you can play the Blood Hunter, which kind of uses hemocraft, your own blood, and taking a little bit of damage to use your blood magic to inflict curses on your enemies. This was created by Matthew Mercer. It's a lot of fun to play as well, but not every DM is going to allow this, so make sure they're okay with Critical Role content before you choose it. As you can see here, the D10 is the hit die for the Blood Hunter. Every time you level up, you roll your hit die, and you add your Constitution modifier to see how much your health permanently increases when you level up. Also, when you take a short rest, you're allowed to roll hit dice to heal points as well. So if you don't have time for your team to take a long rest and heal everything, you want to use your hit dice. So having the highest number possible can definitely be handy if you're the type of player who's running up to the front of combat and taking a lot of damage. As a barbarian, you would get the most, which is a D12. Primary ability strength, pretty obvious for that class. If you're going to do something like, let's say, a wizard. Well, if you're doing a wizard, you have the lowest possible, a D6. And that's because this class is typically a little bit more squishy. They're easy to hit, easy to take down, because they typically hang back away from everyone else in battle, cast spells from a distance, but they're incredibly powerful. The flip side of being squishy is that you do a lot of damage with your spells and you get more magic than anybody else, which is pretty neat. I think we're going to pick Let's do a sorcerer here, which again has a d6, but they have prime ability is charisma, and I find for role-playing that's a lot of fun when you're more charismatic, so we're going to do a sorcerer. Now some classes, I would say the majority of classes, you don't get to pick your subclass until you're level 3. Some are level 2, sorcerers are great because you pick right away at level 1. Now, not every option is going to be listed. Some are available for purchase in the marketplace. Definitely take your time to read through these. They're pretty interesting. Storm Sorcery gives you certain types of spells. And you can actually click on later levels to see what other things you're going to get from this subclass. But I don't want to do that one. I like the idea of wild magic. Wild magic means unpredictable magic runs through your veins, giving you the ability to cast spells. And when you do cast spells, crazy things happen. When you use certain abilities, you have to roll on the wild magic table to see what happens. So, let's say we were going to do that. Oh, let's go here and just say... roll D100. Go! $69. No jokes, people. Come on. Be mature. So, we roll down to 69. Each creature within 30 feet of you becomes invisible for the next minute. The invisibility ends on a creature when it attacks or casts a spell. That's pretty awesome considering it's just a random thing that happens. Or you could be frightened by the nearest creature of you until the end of your next turn. It could be good and it could be bad, but there's just random crazy magic that happens whenever you cast certain spells or use certain abilities. And I think if our backstory for our character is that she's from the Feywild, which is a weird, wacky, magical land, then yeah, I think that's a really good subclass for her. And again, that's sort of what you think about. You want to think about where are they from? What's their story? What are their goals? What do they want to do? And then use that to kind of decide what sort of character you're going to build. Now, proficiencies just means you get a bonus to any skill checks you make. If I'm trying to convince someone of something and persuade them, I want that to work. That is a charisma skill, and we're already going to have a bonus to that stat, so let's do that. And Arcana are just checks about magical things. So if we're growing up in a magical world and then coming to this world, it makes sense that we'd be pretty good with magic. Alright, so let's head over to abilities. Now, your abilities are going to determine what bonuses you get for certain skill checks. It's also going to determine how much damage you do on top of your spells. And when people are trying to make saving throws to not be affected by your spells, you want it to be a really hard number for them to reach. So you want to put certain points into certain stats for yourself. Now, there are 3 methods. One, which is standard array, where these are your numbers you can pick from, and you assign them to certain categories. There's one option called manual rolled, where you roll 4 dice and you take your top 3 numbers, and then you would assign that to a category once you have all your numbers rolled. Now, not every dungeon master allows this, so I would ask them if they're okay with that. The reason being is you can easily just keep doing this and resetting it until you get numbers you like, which is cheating, and then your character will be stronger than all the other characters in your campaign, which is definitely a pain for your dungeon master, and it takes away the honesty and fun of the game. So not every DM will allow it. Make sure you ask them first. My personal favorite, though, is point buy. You have 27 points, and you can distribute them however you like. Now keep in mind, because we are a forest gnome, we already have an extra 2 in our intelligence, and we have an extra 1 in our dexterity. So, if we go over to this incredible website here, RPG Bot, it actually shows us where to put our stats for each character. Now, In general, I'm not a huge fan of character optimization. I don't think you should be striving to make the best possible build. I think you should be striving to make a fun build, a character that you're going to enjoy playing. But as a new player, I find this is a great tool to help you know how to get started. Now, you can go through lists of spells, feats, races, classes, and learn about them to determine which one you like the best. For now, we're going to go into the Sorcerer Handbook. So we could even go here and then just go down, find our character optimization, go into classes, and scroll down until we find Sorcerer. Hit the handbook here. First thing you're going to see is a little bit of a description about what sorcerers are. So unlike some classes where you are taught magic by others, the sorcerers are unique because the magic is within them already. And the origin is, why do you have magic in you already? So for example, a dragon blood sorcerer is a sorcerer because someone down the line, one of their ancestors was a dragon. So, as a descendant, they are innately born with magical abilities, which is pretty cool. All different kinds of reasons. So they are complex, they can be, but they can be a lot of fun as well. It kind of goes over everything here. Charisma is the main stat you want. So, picking a race with a bonus to their intelligence and dexterity isn't usually what people do if they're playing a class that requires high charisma. They would pick a race that already has a bump to their charisma, like a Dragonborn or something like that. I don't really care too much about optimizing the stats. Again, I'm just trying to make a fun character that I'm going to enjoy playing. So, the website does a great job at kind of labeling for you what are good options and bad options. And again, it doesn't mean you have to always pick the blue one. You can pick an orange one or a red one and just be like, hey, screw it, I want to have fun, and that's what I want to do. Good for you. Do whatever makes you happy. They're just here to help you and kind of teach you the ropes for beginners. So, wild magic. Exciting but unpredictable. Wild magic sorcerers can manipulate luck to grant themselves advantage on some rolls and apply a small bonus or penalty to others. But casting spells may trigger rolls in the wild magic table, which is what we rolled on to get everyone invisible, which can add both a challenge to role-playing sessions or combat sessions, but can also make things a lot more fun and interesting. Meta magic is the big thing that sorcerers have. So you use your meta magic to alter your spells, regain spell slots, and things like that nobody else can do. Spell slots just means you only have a certain number of spells you can cast until you take a long rest. But sorcerers can use their sorcery points to bring back spells for themselves, or do other things, which are pretty neat. They just have a lot more versatility with magic than other classes do. So, as for the stats, where we are right now, choosing where we're going to put everything, this is the part that I mostly use this website for. At this point, I kind of know what I want from my characters when I'm creating it, because I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons for almost 12 years now. But for people who are new, when you get to this point, you have no idea where you want to put your stats. So sometimes I just go to the correct handbook for the class, and I scroll all the way down here right away just to see what stats I need to add. As you can see here, this is what they suggest for point buy. 5, 10, 10, 14, 14, and 8. So, if we're going to do this, I also like to just bring this up right next to it so that I don't have to keep going back and forth. The most important is charisma. So we're going to put that at a 15. Wisdom at a 10. We have constitution at a 14. And dexterity at a 14. And intelligence at a 10. Now, here's the neat thing. Because we have a bonus to intelligence, that's going to be a 12. Now, we don't necessarily need that to be a 12, but we can leave it there if we want to. We could take 2 points away, because it's already at a 10, and add those 2 points somewhere else. Now, because Dexterity helps you with your armor class, and Constitution helps you with how many hit points you're going to get every time you level up. It almost makes sense to turn one of these two into a 15. So, because this one's already a little bit higher, but I think we're going to add to Constitution, just to make our character a little bit more hardy, a little bit more strong, and sacrifice some of the intelligence. Which again makes sense, because most people from the Feywild are a little goofy and a little wacky, so it'll be fun. Background. And this is something that gives you extra abilities based on who your character was before they met the rest of your adventuring party. You can work with this with your dungeon master. They probably have some good ideas they can help you with. Or if you already kind of know what you wanted your character to be, you can definitely do that as well. I want my character to have kind of lived with their family in the Feywild, and they begged and begged and begged their parents to finally let them go on vacation in the material realm, the material plane. She finally went on vacation, and so she's just wandering and just kind of enjoying things. So I'm not really sure what the best is going to be here. I think let's do urchin. Because right now she's poor. She's living on the streets. We'll say that, you know, she didn't realize how expensive these cities and towns would be. And so she spent most of her money in the first month. And for the last 6 months or so, she's been pretty poor. So she's had to use some magic and such to steal. So she's going to have a bonus to her stealth and her sleight of hand, which is used to steal things or pick locks. She's got some thief tools and a disguise kit. So that helps her get into all kinds of trouble. You know the secret patterns and flow to cities and can find passages through their urban sprawl. Each background will have various features that help assist you. Now, there are suggested characteristics that you can pick from, or you can create your own. Things like, I respect all people, rich or poor, that's a good thing. If you want to be a more chaotic character, then you might pick something like this. If you want to be a straight up evil character, then you can pick one of those things. But again, you don't have to, you can make up your own. Speaking of which, your alignment. This is going to determine how you're going to play your character. Most DMs, if you pick one of these and then you start acting in contradictory ways, they'll find a way to punish you. For this character, she's kind of chaotic. Because she's a bit of a thief, and she's a little out there and wacky, and doesn't quite understand the laws of the material plane. We're going to make her a chaotic build. We definitely don't want her to be evil, because she's not trying to hurt anybody. She's also not trying to necessarily go out of her way to help everyone, but if she can, if she will, or she will if she can, yeah, they're going to act as they're self-conscious with little regard for what others expect. Yeah, so I mean, she doesn't really know what they expect. She doesn't know the laws around here, but she'll help people if she can. As for faith, if your character does have a faith, you can definitely research the deities or speak to your dungeon master and see if they have a homebrew created deity that they want to use. And you can put that in here. If you're a class that doesn't require faith, if you're not, you know, like a cleric or a paladin, you don't necessarily need to believe in a deity. You can just leave that blank. Lifestyle, we're going to be wretched, which means we got nothing. We got no money left. We are completely poor as of this beginning first session that we're playing with our friends. As for this, you can go back to that page for the race and kind of read through what the averages are and then come up with your own idea of how old they are, what stage of life are they in, are they short, are they tall, are they fat, are they skinny, what color eyes, skin, hair. You can really make this whatever you want. Gender, again, we all know in society now that, you know, there are more than two genders. You don't just have to be female, male, whatever makes you happy, just go for it. Or you can leave it blank. You don't have to answer that to people. And then you can add suggested, you know, character traits, little quirks, ideals, bonds. The big one for me is flaws. This is incredibly important to me, and I think the reason is the more I played Dungeons and Dragons, the more I realized that I don't want to just roll dice and attack people. You know, it's a more fun story when you grow as a character. And I'm always promoting character growth as much as humanly possible. So, if you look back on a character like I do with my first D&D characters, everything was kind of just about, I want to do the most damage. I want to just fight and be powerful and have a cool character. And that's great, but then years later when you look back on that campaign or that character, you think, yeah, I don't really care. I didn't know what I was doing. You know, the character wasn't my favorite. It was kind of boring to play in hindsight. If you create a character with flaws, and you have a goal that this is who I want to be at the end, but I'm way back here now at the beginning, and that's my goal, but my character has all these struggles that could prevent them from getting to that point. That to me is way more interesting. Because when you look back on that character, you're going to get attached to them. You're going to be emotional. You're going to role play as them. And you're going to go on a journey with them. You're not just going to run through the motions. You are literally going to go on a journey with that character. And then when you think back on your experience, you're going to fondly remember all of those experiences playing in that campaign with that character. And when you give yourself more flaws to overcome, it makes it entertaining for everybody else, and I guarantee you it will make it so much more fun for you. Think about your favorite characters. One of the reasons Superman was always boring to me was because he always did the right thing. He was almost unbeatable. He was just too perfect and too good all the time. That's not fun to watch. Which is why Henry Cavill's Superman was fantastic. He killed someone in the first movie, didn't want to, and was kind of haunted by that. You can see the pain on his face when he did it. He didn't want to do it, and a lot of people didn't like that. But I thought, that's fantastic. You're showing a flawed person who made a hard call, who broke his moral code, who didn't want to do it, but had to. Characters that live in black and white get boring really fast. But characters that live in gray area are more relatable. So they're more fun to watch and learn about and interact with. And your growth doesn't always have to be, hey, I have flaws and I want to get better. It can be, let's say your character is lawful good, which means if they see anyone bad or a member of your group lies or steals or anything, they condemn that. Everything's black and white, good or evil, and there's no in between. Maybe they stop a robbery because that's their lawful good alignment. But then they realize that it was just people stealing for an orphanage, and now all those kids are going to die. And maybe you come back to the town later on, and those orphans starved because you stopped the robbery. In your head, you did the right thing, but now you're seeing the damage that your actions caused. And again, you don't have to make it that serious. You can make it a lighter-hearted thing. But maybe your character progression is realizing that gray area is okay. Maybe not everything is right and wrong. Maybe there is an in-between. Another idea I thought was really neat. I mentioned earlier the Goblin Barbarian. Maybe the character growth you want to go on isn't even internal. Maybe it's not even an emotional or intellectual or maturity-based thing. Maybe it's literally just, I want to become stronger. So you get a goblin who maybe has a 10 strength or something, which means they get no bonus to their attack. It's +0. You just roll the dice and that's whatever it is. Maybe the entire journey that your goblin is going on is getting strength, or your halfling, or whatever you're playing, so that they can be a great fighter and a great barbarian. Maybe they have to find locations where they can train with the best and learn fighting techniques. Maybe they have to find magical items that bump up their strength. Maybe that is their growth, is that, hey, I want to become the first ever halfling barbarian. You know, it's really cool. And then maybe they multi-class into something else because their growth becomes emotional or intellectual, and they decide, I don't need that. That's not important in life. There's all kinds of things you can do at that point. So give your character flaws, allow them to overcome those flaws, and you will love your experience so much more, I promise you. Once we get into notes, any organizations you're a part of, you can add them right in here. Any allies, you can add your fellow party members in here. Enemies, anything from your backstory, you can put names of characters in here. As for your backstory, as a general rule, I ask my players to all give me at least a paragraph, a few sentences. The more you give your dungeon master, the more likely they are to include fun little surprises and things from your backstory woven into the main story of whatever you're playing through. Whether it's a homebrew campaign or if it's a real campaign, an official published adventure that they're running, they're more likely to use parts of your backstory and involve you in the game more, which is going to immerse you more in what you're doing. So you definitely don't have to do a whole lot of stuff if you don't want to. You can even tell your dungeon master, hey, I'm just here for the fun. I don't need my character to have the spotlight. That's okay. But the more you give your DM, the more they're going to work with. Just letting you know now. But I like things as they are here. So let's move on. Now, each class is going to have specific options for starting equipment. You can just choose gold, and then you can go through the player's handbook and see what starting equipment is and choose to purchase things. But if you really want to optimize your best starting point at level 1, always just choose this starting equipment here. So, for a sorcerer, they do want to give you some melee weapons. That way, if someone does charge at you, you're not completely defenseless and only have your magic available. Because we have a very low strength, we are not going to be able to use any like heavy attack weapons. So bludgeoning weapons, slashing weapons, we're done. But we can use finesse weapons like rapiers or daggers, or ranged things like crossbows, because our dexterity score is actually pretty high with this character. So these are our options here for handheld weapons. But I kind of like the idea of having a crossbow so we can stay far away and just shoot people. And our high dexterity will give us a good bonus to our attacks with the crossbow. A component pouch. Some spells require components. Most dungeon masters don't require you to have all your components unless it's something really expensive like a diamond or something that has a gold value associated with it. Then they might ask you to go get those components. An arcane focus allows you to cast without these smaller components as it is already. So what we're going to do here is say maybe our sorcerer has a little wand that she's going to use. Let's bring this back up into the main one here. Here we go. A Dungeoneer's pack or an Explorer's pack. So these will just give you some basic equipment to start out with. Backpack, crowbar, hammer, pittance, tinderbox, rations, things like that. I don't think our Feywild sorcerer is going to have the stuff to go, into dungeons and go underground. They're more likely going to have this stuff, which is more camping materials and things for outside, rope, rations, torches, that sort of thing. So let's do that. It already does give us 2 daggers, which is great, and then just some more, so a little bit of gold, some common clothes, token to remember your parents by, which actually for our backstory is awesome. And a map of the city we grew up in, we can literally make that a map of the Feywild, or the portion of the Feywild we grew up in. Ask your dungeon master to make that themselves, and then who knows, maybe there's a chance you and your party will go to the Feywild to visit your family at some point. So again, we created a cool, a very simple backstory, but it could be connected to the campaign through stuff like that if your dungeon master chooses to. So we're going to add our starting equipment, and then we're going to make sure everything is being used. So we're going to wield it, make sure we're holding got our daggers on us, our crossbow bolts, our crossbow, and the backpack just adds a little bit extra weight, but allows you to put stuff in the backpack. You don't start with any armor. Most sorcerers don't typically have armor. They're things you can get later. So let's look at our character sheet here. And then I'll go over with you guys kind of the basics of where to find everything on your character sheet. And then you're making sure that you're not going to miss anything. Alright, so first off, up here shows your level. You're a forest gnome, you're a sorcerer. Level 1, and Lessra is your name. If you go to manage, you can hit manage character levels and it takes us back into our character editor. You can also change your name here, or we can change our character sheet appearance. Alright, so I finally got things set up a little bit. Sorry, my internet was going a little bit crazy, a little bit slow. But we got our portrait in there. We got our cool magical little aura. We got our pink colored kind of framework here, which is pretty cool. Just left the background as it is for now. There is also the option of going dark mode, but again, I feel like that just depends on which character I'm playing. She's a really loving, happy-go-lucky, chaotic little fireball. There's no reason for her to have dark on there. So, let's kind of go over the basics here. Beyond 20. The reason I have this in here is because I have an extension in my browser that allows my dice rolls to show up on whichever virtual tabletop we're playing on. So if you're playing online, most likely your dungeon master has set up a game on something like Foundry or Roll20 or Battlegrounds, where you have a map and your character tokens and enemies, and you move your people around and do your battle there. If you have the Beyond 20 extension, every time you hover over a roll here, if you click on the B, it will not only roll it on D&D Beyond here, but it will also send your roll through to your virtual tabletop so everyone can see it. So that can definitely be handy. You don't have to do that, but it can be helpful. Share, pretty obvious. Short rest. Now here's the big difference in D&D. When you take a short rest, that means you have to spend an hour just resting and relaxing. A long rest, I believe, is 8 hours long. If you take a short rest, let's say you took 3 damage in battle, you only have 5 left. If you want to take a short rest over that hour, because we're level 1, we only have 1 hit dice. Once we're level 2, we'll have 2, 3 we'll have 3, and so forth. Our constitution, which is how sturdy and strong we are, we put that as a 15. So for every 2 over 10, we get a +1. So because we're at +5, it's a +2. Once we get to +16, it'll be a +3. So every time we heal, we roll a d6, and we add our constitution modifier when we heal with our hit dice. So if you take a short rest, you're allowed to use up as many hit dice as you have and heal that amount. So we would roll this, which would be a 2, plus 2 is 4, which heals us back to 8. You cannot heal over your max, so you only heal to 8. Let's say we took 7 points of damage, and then you go to bed for the night. Wait to make sure that your dungeon master confirms that you completed the long rest. I would have players sometimes, as soon as they camp for the night, hit the long rest and heal themselves. But if your dungeon master chooses to attack your party during the night, and you have all your spells back, well, that's not fair. You haven't taken a full long rest yet. You shouldn't have those spells. So wait for your dungeon master to confirm that you've completed the long rest, and then it will automatically give you back your spell slots and heal your damage there. So you confirm, and boom, you're back to 8, which is pretty great, right? If you happen to have any resistances or immunities, they will be listed here if you get them from items or from your race. If somebody else heals you, you can always put the number in here and add your healing. Pretty simple stuff there, right? Over here, speed is 25. That's your walking speed. Most virtual tabletops all the maps will be gridded, and each little square on the grid is 5 feet. So because you have 25-foot walking speed, you can move 5 feet per turn. Now you can break up that however you want to in your turn. You can walk 5 feet, cast a spell, then walk 20 feet. You can do whatever you want. You can break it up throughout your turn. Your proficiency bonus, this increases as you level up. It increases very slowly. It never gets too much higher than this. But the skills that we chose to be proficient in, remember, like persuading people, our background as an urchin gives us proficiency in stealth and sleight of hand, arcana. It means that when we have to make a skill check, so let's say we see a glowing orb around something, and we tell our DM, do I know what that is? If it's like a magical spell causing it, he'll say, or he, she, or they will say, make an arcana check for me. In which case you would hit this button, which is rolling a d20 and adding 2 to it. And you rolled a 20. That is very high. So your DM will say, You absolutely recognize that. That is a shield of protection, meaning you cannot touch that object. If you rolled a 2, they'd say, you have no idea what it is, but you're really curious about it. There are different, like when you ask your DM if you can do things in the game, there are different checks that they're going to make you do. Now, because our dexterity modifier is 2, for all the skills here that say dexterity, it's a +2. We go down here, these would be +2, but because we're proficient, these little black dots, we add our proficiency bonus. Now, let's say someone's casting a spell on us. We would then make our saving throw, and we have proficiency in charisma and constitution, which because of our class, because of a sorcerer. So we take our modifiers. So these bottom big numbers are our scores, our ability scores. These are our ability modifiers. So we would, for dexterity, we're just rolling a 2. For strength, it's a -1, sadly. But because we have proficiency in these two, we take our constitution and our charisma, we add our proficiency bonus, and that's why we get a higher one there. Now, this is pretty cool. Because of being a gnome, we get advantage on saving throws against magic. So if someone's trying to charm us or hurt us with magic, and we have to make a saving throw of any of these kinds, any of these 3, we get advantage on the roll. Now, what advantage means is you roll your d20 twice, and whichever the higher number is, you get to pick that one. If you're ever rolling a disadvantage, sadly, it's the opposite. You're rolling 2 d20, and you're taking the lowest of the 2, which kind of sucks. So that covers saving throws, skills, proficiency bonus, walking speed, hit points, ability scores. Initiative is your dexterity bonus. So initiative just means when combat's going to ensue, all of your enemies and your fellow party members and yourself will roll initiative, and that will determine the turn order of who goes first. Obviously, dexterity is who's moving the quickest and the fastest, so that makes sense. If you click on your armor class here, it'll show you how you came about your armor class. Everyone starts with a 10. No matter what, you start with a 10 as a player. Your dexterity bonus is what increases your armor class, like I mentioned when we were looking through our skills. So, right now, we have a +2. If we can find a way to just add 1 more to our score, that 16 will give us a +3, and then our armor class will go up to 13, which is pretty great. You can also wear certain armors, which can increase as well. It would just add your armor of 10 plus whatever the armor is, and it would get rid of the dex score there. So, that covers everything on the top, most of the stuff on the side. Over here, these are your senses, which are given to you based on, your class or your race. Because we're a forest gnome, we get dark vision up to 60 feet, which is pretty great. When it comes to your passive wisdom, your passive perception, the things you hear and see without actually looking at them, you get a 10. Why? Because our wisdom is a 10. Our passive intelligence, or investigation, is a 10 because our intelligence is a 10. And wisdom, once again, for our insight, being able to tell whether or not people are lying or the truth behind their words, things like that. Again, we're using our scores for those. Armor, you're not proficient with any armor because you're a spellcaster. Weapons, you're proficient with a crossbow, light crossbow, daggers, darts, quarterstaffs, simple weapons, right? You're proficient with disguise kits and thieves' tools because of our urchin background, as you can see here. When you hover over things, it does show you where you get them from. We know Gnomish and Common as our languages. Now, for the good stuff, what you're going to use in combat. Most of this stuff is all used for role-playing and interacting with people and out-of-combat stuff. This is really what you need for combat. If you're not sure exactly how combat works, you have an action on your turn, you have a bonus action, and you have your movement. You can only use reactions on someone else's turn. So, certain spellcasters, let's say you have a spell called Shield. If someone attacks you with a spell or a magic effect, as a reaction you can cast Shield, which protects you, but you can't cast it on your turn. It has to be done by a reactionary thing. So on your turn, you just get action, bonus action, and movement, which is our 25 speed. D&D Beyond is great because it sets up everything here for you. It shows you everything, so all of your options are laid out in front of you, and you can't miss it. Now, a Tide of Chaos, that's something you get from your subclass being a wild magic sorcerer. So once per long rest, you get to gain advantage on an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. But the DM can have you roll on that wild magic table if you want to, just for fun. And if they do that, you get this back. And it's no longer used. You don't have to wait for a long rest. So it's up to your DM how much fun they want to do with you. But like we talked about, being able to roll it twice and take the higher number, that's pretty great. It's definitely a great thing to do if you desperately need to succeed at something. As for your attacks, right now we have our weapons set up here. Our dexterity bonus is 2. But again, because we're proficient with daggers, crossbows, these things, all of these attack rolls are a +4 instead. So let's say I saw an enemy and I wanted to shoot them. I would roll a d20 +4. Alright, so that gives us a 15. If they have an armor class that's 15 or lower, so let's say someone shot me with that and I had a 12, a 15 is definitely going to hit me. In which case they then roll their damage. Alright, so they deal 3 plus 2. Your proficiency bonus doesn't get added to the damage. So it's just the dice plus our dexterity +2. So it's a 1d8 +2. And so let's say they did that 5 damage to me. I would put the 5 in here, hit damage. That's not right. Anyway, let's put the 5 in here. Then damage puts me down to 3. Which I'm pretty weak now. I'm scared. I'm nervous. Bonus actions, we don't have any yet. A lot of spells can be cast as bonus actions. And that's what we'll get to. The final thing here. Remember, we have our minor illusion spell that we got just for being a gnome, which is pretty cool. Free spells are always great. We can have 4 cantrips. We can have 2 known spells. As we level up, we get access to many more spells. And right now we only have first level spells, but as we level up, we get second levels, which are more powerful, and third and fourth, and so on. So right now we're going to pick our cantrips first. Read the descriptions and see which things that you think are going to be fun. It's good to have some that deal damage. It's good to have 1 or 2 maybe that either heal or protect people. And then it might be good to have 1 or 2 spells that are just good outside of combat. Mind controlling people, or tricking them, or making distracting lights and things like that. It's good to not just cater everything towards combat, because depending on what kind of game you're playing, you could spend the majority of your time talking to people and engaging in adventure and conversation. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to add friends. Because you get advantage on all charisma checks, and my charisma is already very high. And a creature of your choice isn't hostile towards you, but they'll know you tricked them after the spell is over. But if it's a guard who doesn't want to let you in somewhere, you cast friends on them, all of a sudden they think you're their best friend, they're probably going to let you in. So that's good for outside of combat. Message is great because you can talk to people on the other side of a building, around the corner, things like that, if they're close enough to you. They have to be 120 feet away, but it's nice to be able to communicate from across the room. So I'm going to do that one for sure. And then we're just going to add Ray of Frost and Firebolt, which are pretty good attacks. Cantrips are cool spells because there's no limit. There's no spell slots up here. We only have 2 spells right now that we can cast per long rest with our first level spells. Cantrips, there's no limit. You can roll them as many times as you want. So if I were going to fire a magical firebolt at someone, I would roll a d20 plus 4 to see if it hits them, and if it does, I roll 1d10 damage. Pretty easy, right? So if we're going to go back to our first level spells, the zeros are cantrips. These kind of,
organize them for you. If I wanted to get rid of my cantrips now and just look at my first level spells, I could do that. Like I mentioned, that shield spell, that means an invisible barrier protects you against attack. So until the start of your next turn. So if somebody tries to attack you, as a reaction, when it's not even your turn, you just bring up a magical shield, increases our armor class by 5, which means now I'm a 17 until my turn starts again. So I'm definitely taking one shield spell, which is great. I can only cast it, a couple times, so I got to be careful when I choose to use that. And then for my other spell, there's all kinds of interesting things here we can do. But I want this to be another fun thing. See, mage armor is also a decent idea because I'm not wearing any armor. My armor class becomes 13 plus my dex modifier for 8 hours. So I can cast that whenever I want. And then it becomes 13 plus 2. So now I've got a 15. And because I'm a pretty low health character, I want some spells that are going to increase my strength. So those are my spells. Right now, as you can see, one action. All my spells are taking an action. I have one reaction, but the rest are all actions. There are spells that require bonus actions. And those will show up later on as you get access to more. Any spell that has a little C next to it just means that that's a concentration spell, which means anytime you take damage, you have to roll to see if you maintain it. And while you're doing that, you cannot cast another spell that also has a C. You can cast other ones that don't, but you can only have one little concentration spell going at a time. And your dungeon master should touch on this with you as well. But when it comes down to casting multiple spells on a turn, you can cast a cantrip and a spell slot required spell on the same turn, but one of them has to be an action and one has to be a bonus action. I can't cast 2 action spells because you only get 1 action per turn. So if you use it to attack, you can't cast a spell unless it's a bonus action spell. Okay? So pretty easy stuff. And again, I know this is a lot, but the more repetition you get, the more you're going to get used to it. And again, I really like this character now because she's fun, she's chaotic, and I've got really good skills that I can use. I love the idea that I can cast friends on people to make them friendly toward me and want to help me through things. That's really exciting. And this one's a cantrip, so I can use it as many times as I want. The problem is they might make a saving throw against it. And it might not work. Or as soon as I'm done, they're going to know I did it and they might chase me around. But anyway, I think this is a really fun character. I've got a fun backstory. I've got some flaws that she's going to have to overcome. Being someone who likes mischief a little bit too much and likes chaos and doesn't really think about the consequences of her actions. She's just kind of running through the town, trying to have fun, trying to have adventures. She left her parents alone in the Fey realm because she was so focused on her own selfish desires for adventure. There's all kinds of things a dungeon master can then do with that. And then, you want to find some kind of progression. Like, what do I want my character to learn? Why are they going on this adventure? What's the purpose of that? And so in this very small exercise, I've created a character that I'd be really excited to play. So again, I hope that just gives you the basics of how to create a character, how to find inspiration, kind of how to set up your points across your character, and then kind of getting things ready.
All right, so that was a lot of fun. Very basic, simple way to make a character. You can make it as complicated or as simple as you want with your backstory, with character flaws. And this was only one option. We picked one race, we picked one class, and we picked one subclass. Now, there are 13 or 14 different classes you can choose from, and each class has anywhere from 5 to 10 subclasses. So when you factor in the different races you can play as, the different classes you can play as, and the different subclasses attached to those classes, there is a ridiculous number of combinations that you can create. So whatever kind of idea or theme you have in your head for a character you want to play, there's probably more than one way that you can create a version of that character in D&D. And I only did, obviously, our Gnome Sorcerer, and we did our Wild Magic subclass, but I can go through any number of combinations. So if there's a class that you really want to see, if there's a subclass you really want to see, if you'd like me to do a video reviewing the characters that I've either played as or currently playing as, I would be happy to do that. If there's something specific you'd like to see, please put it in the comments below, and I'll do my best to make a video to show you guys all the different options available. But thank you very much for joining me. I hope you guys are staying safe and enjoying yourselves in the holiday season, and we'll see you in the new year.